Welcome everyone to Dreamforce and our session on scaling data, compute, and in fact, the skills that you can use to build amazing solutions on Salesforce and Heroku. I'm delighted to be here with Sai. He is from Workday and he'll be talking you through how they have achieved great scale and skills use using Heroku and Salesforce in combination. I'm Andy Fawcett, I'm VP of Product, Head of Product for Heroku. We will be talking about some future-facing features, so please make your purchase decisions based on those features that are in market. First of all, thank you so much for the time that you've taken to spend with us in this session. There are many sessions to choose from at Dreamforce, and I know from experience, it's hard to choose. So we're very grateful for the time you're spending with us in the next 20 minutes to learn about the message we've got to give you and the excitement that we want to pass on to you. The Customer 360 is a powerful combination of many offerings from Salesforce. And we're delighted to see Heroku make it onto the Salesforce Customer 360. This represents the fact that Salesforce and Heroku are really very powerful when put together, whether you're using MuleSoft and Heroku, Service Cloud in Heroku, Sales Cloud in Heroku, any of the clouds in fact here can be accelerated in the way that you customize, bring your customers into those products when you have developer skills to do so. And developer skills are difficult to find and acquire. So it's important to have the option to use various types of skills, whether it's using Apex, Java, Node.js, Ruby, or any other technologies that are available in the industry. So part of scaling is about scaling the resources and the people you have to help you build those solutions, as much as it is about scaling the solutions themselves. Now with all compute, you do have lots of compute options available to you when you're inside the org and you're programming typically with Apex or declarative tools. You can run long-running Apex jobs. But typically those jobs are by design throttled in certain ways to maintain and manage the system and the performance of your org. You also find that there are CPU limits related with Apex, which are again designed to protect the integrity of the system, but often find yourself working against those when you have heavy compute loads to do. Concurrency limits also protect the system, but not always applicable to the workloads that you're building. If they're long-running workloads doing lots of computational calculations, it's not really a big concern for you. And from a skills point of view, Apex is a wonderful language. I'm very passionate about Apex myself, but we also know that the industry is awash with many other languages that you can access and make available to your skills pool and apply to the solutions that you build. Ultimately, you have to be very careful when using cloud services to manage the APIs that you're calling. And there are many of those to be careful and considerate of. In a platform such as Heroku, on the right-hand side, we see that the dedicated secure environment gives you more flexibility. We literally spin up a compute environment and data environments dedicated to your needs. And you, in fact, are largely responsible for managing the limits within those environments. We scale those to meet your needs as well. Now, when you're coding, you can go beyond Apex and use Java and JavaScript. Not only that, there are a rich tapestry of libraries and open source tools and technologies that are available for you to use. And this isn't the first time Salesforce has made other languages available to the developer experience. In the previous session, we learned about Lightning Web Components. You can use JavaScript at the client end to build great engaging experiences. With Heroku, you can also use skills in these languages to build back-end experiences as well. Syncing data is also important to move the data closer to your application experiences. And with Heroku, you can take some of that CRM and even data cloud data and move that closer to your experiences built in Heroku and that compute by synchronizing with Postgres, which is an industry standard and recognized database management system. Heroku is very opinionated about several things, but it is not opinionated about the tools that you use. As I've just explained, you can use many tools and technologies. But if you have an idea, a web app, a mobile app, an API, and you have the skills and you have an existing application, you want to deploy it to the cloud, we pride ourselves in making sure that you can take that idea, deploy it to Heroku. We'll do all of the complex heavy lifting to manage all of the infrastructure and networking and security and get that to your end users in super quick time. Going from an idea to developing the idea is the shortest path possible with Heroku. The alternative reality is really understanding, gosh, do I need to understand which provider I'm running on? What operating system I'm running? Do I need to patch that operating system? Do I need to think about containerization? What is containerization? What about networking? Really, the comparison is easy to see between the two slides. Do you want to focus on building applications that focus on just application development and not infrastructure? Or do you want to take some of that time and focus that on networking and infrastructure? Hopefully the answer is readily apparent. When you look at that trade-off in terms of the resources, on the left-hand side, we're expending a number of our resources building applications, managing DevOps, as well as the infrastructure. On the right-hand side, with Heroku, we turn that around on its head. Most of your resources is now spent, as they should be, differentiating yourself with your competitors, building great and amazing application experiences. We, as Heroku, take on managing that infrastructure for you. Now, Heroku fundamentally is made up of compute services and data services. We will host and manage a variety of ways to store data at scale in the cloud, whether it's relational database stores, messaging stores, or caching in the form of Postgres, Redis, and Kafka, or whether you need to store compute, and that being code that you simply write in Java, Node, Java, Ruby, and many other languages. The list, in fact, goes on. But we also make sure that when you do that, if you desire to, you can extend all of that into Salesforce, and that's what this session's all about. If you want to develop those solutions in isolation as Salesforce, we're certainly not going to stop you doing so, but most of our customers have purchased multiple products from Salesforce and want to use the power of Heroku in combination, particularly with CRM-type processes and automations. And that's what Workday is here to tell us a little bit more about. But let me tell you a little bit more about that in the abstract. The ways in which you can use Heroku with Flow and Apex. We're all familiar, perhaps if you're familiar with Heroku, of synchronizing data between Postgres. But how many of you knew that if you hit a computational heavy experience in Flow, that you do in fact have another option? The first part of this process involves in defining an API, and we looked at industry standards to define that API, and of course, open languages like Java and JavaScript. The second step is to test that API, and again, industry standards help us test that API and deploy it to Heroku. And finally, we get to use it and give it to our admins and all our Apex developers. I'm going to walk you through as quickly as I possibly can. 20-minute developer sessions are a little bit of a challenge, I must admit, at Dreamforce this year. But step one, I'm a Node developer, I'm using JavaScript, and I'm using a library called Fastify. It's an awesome library for demystifying what OpenAPI is all about. Here, I'm just defining what a book is. A book consists of an ID, a title, an author, and a published at date. I'm also defining what my error messages look like. It's a very clean way to explain my API contract in code. Fantastic library, works perfectly with Heroku. The second step that I'm going to do is actually write my logic. And in this case, I'm retrieving a list of books from my database. So I've used Heroku to provision me a Postgres database. I'm not a database admin professional. I don't know how to set up databases. I just ran a command line on Heroku and I got my database. And now with this JavaScript code, I'm reading my database and executing SQL queries. So now I've defined my API and I've written my API code with Fastify. Now with one command line with Heroku, I'm suddenly an infrastructure expert, a network expert. Well, not really, but I'm running one command, git push Heroku main. It takes the code that I've developed locally on my computer and deploys it to the infrastructure. We spin up all of the necessary AWS technology, we patch it, we make sure it's running on the latest security. You issue a URL to the browser, and if this looks a little complex, well, that's what OpenAPI looks like in the raw. That's a schema definition of your API that we just published. But the great news is yet another open source library called Swagger gives us a nice visual representation of API. And I can test my API and experience my API. But wait, you're saying, Andy, so far, how am I using this within Salesforce? Well, our third and final step is leveraging that. There's an amazing feature, go to the setup menu, search for external services. That technology in Salesforce speaks OpenAPI. If you created, as easy as I just demonstrated, an API in Heroku, suddenly that Heroku logic is available in Flow as an action. It's also available to Apex developers. So you can see how easy it is for admins to get access to code that you've authored in Heroku, using all the power and scale and languages available, as well as Apex developers to get hold of that. So this is a very quick tour of what is a great blog by Julian Duque. Here's one of our amazing developer evangelists. Take a look at that QR code, dig deep into that blog from him, and you'll get a much more relaxed, self-paced way of learning about all of the ways in which you can take Heroku code and Node code and run that within Flow and Apex. So with that in mind, it's time that we made this more concrete. I talked to you about the abstract and the art of the possible, but the most compelling story is yet to come from Sai, who's going to tell us how he's literally transformed their business with Heroku and Salesforce in Workday. Take it away.
Thank you, Andy.
Lots of fans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dreamforce. I'm happy to represent Workday team here and talk about how Workday is using the power of Salesforce and Heroku to solve some very important critical needs that we have. So a little bit about Workday. We are a global company with about 10,000 customers across the globe. A lot of companies trust us for managing their HR, finance, planning, and more applications. So we were founded in 2005, headquartered in Pleasanton, California. We are a 18,000 employee company and growing very fast. And our annual revenue was $6.5 billion as of 2022. So at Workday, we have a large footprint of Salesforce. Most of our CRM applications are all on Salesforce built in. So today we're going to talk about two unique use cases where we leverage the power of Heroku paired with Salesforce to solve our business needs. One of those is our quoting application. So all of our quoting runs out of Salesforce system. And as our company's growth has evolved, we have complex business requirements that needed us to code and generated a lot of compute on the Salesforce environment. So a few years ago, when we ran into this challenge where we had to take large quoting out of our online system and manually generate those codes, it was not an experience that we wanted to give to our customers, as well as inefficiencies that we're causing. So that's where Heroku came into play for us. So we have built a pricing engine that runs out of Heroku and embeds nicely into Salesforce, and with that we are able to achieve that. And you'll see subsequently how we are doing that and what were the key considerations for us as we build the pricing engine on Heroku. On the second very different use cases, as I mentioned, we have a very large footprint of Salesforce. We have about 400 developers, 6 full copy sandboxes that we leverage in our environments. And as these sandboxes go down for refresh, we were losing critical working day downtime because of the time it takes to mask the data for, let's say, contacts and leads. So that's where we said, why don't we use Heroku and leverage the power of Heroku to kind of optimize the time it takes to refresh our sandboxes and make these environments available. So with that, today we've achieved about 15,000 hours of savings, so which has gone back to developer productivity to build the apps that we need to build. So in terms of the pricing engine, one of the key things for us was we wanted to make sure that all the communication between Salesforce and Heroku was secure. So we're using Java, JSON Web Tokens and certificate for our authentication between the servers. We are also wanting to make sure that our performance is top notch, and we aim to have every API return in less than a second. So these were the key considerations, and we are using obviously the power of Heroku Connect to synchronize the metadata between Salesforce and Heroku. And while we built this pricing engine on Heroku, what were the key things that we had to consider, right? So one, as I mentioned, we had to secure our integration between Salesforce and Heroku. We had to optimize the exchange of payload between Salesforce and Heroku, as we call these APIs. We also wanted to not build a monolithic application on Heroku. So we took the microservices approach of building atomic APIs that can nicely integrate back into Salesforce and obviously leverage Heroku for that. So with that, what we are able to achieve is 100% of our pricing today runs out of Heroku, and 23% of our codes are actually very large codes that span multi-years with 100 plus lines. So all of our pricing engine today nicely runs out of Heroku and integrates back into Salesforce. So at a high level, the architecture looks like this, where we are having our sales teams that are working off our Salesforce platform all the way from demand generation through opportunity management. And as they enter through the quoting application, we do not lose the context and gracefully handle the pricing out of Heroku and bring those back into Salesforce. So as a salesperson that I'm living within Salesforce, I never have to leave my experience within Salesforce while the pricing engine is happening in the background with the power of Heroku. And with that, we are also behind the scenes using the connector to move the data back and forth. Now, a very different use case, as I mentioned, which is the custom data masking solution that we have built on Heroku. So as I indicated, it took about 12 hours to mask the data if we were to rely on Salesforce's batch jobs to go and mask this data using batch, because there is a limit of 5 batch jobs concurrently that you can run. So we were losing working day downtime for all our 400 plus developers, and as company grew, more and more of that was going to happen. So what we did was we built a Heroku connection, which would, after the post refresh from Salesforce side, we would connect from Heroku into Salesforce, pull the data through Heroku Connect, and then mask the data on the Postgres using a Postgres script, and then push it back into Salesforce. What has happened is something that used to take a task automation that used to take 11 hours is now taking an hour. And that's the benefit of using Heroku in this case, to go and mask the data very efficiently and push it back. There are some additional use cases where we are using Heroku for. One of the things is, as most of you know, you may have built custom applications, custom integrations. You want to know what is happening within your Salesforce, and this complements actually some of the offerings like our proactive monitoring service or the other services that Salesforce has. So we've built a custom monitoring application that lives on Heroku, monitors various aspects of Salesforce, and using a custom threshold that we have built, and alerts us so that we can proactively take action and prevent outages for our critical business processes. So we've built that within that, and it integrates nicely back into Slack and also our IT service management tools. The other use case that we have used Heroku is for reports and dashboards. Most of you may have reports and dashboards in your organization, and they keep going, right? So as your data model changes, some reports may be obsolete. People may be accessing obsolete reports that are not up to date. So what we have built here is a custom application that sits within Salesforce, identifies these reports and dashboards that are no longer needed or not used, notifies the users, and users have an ability to elect and say, these are the things that I'm no longer using. And we use Heroku now to pull this data out, move the reports and dashboards into an archive folder, and eventually using APIs to go and purge them as well. So today we have about 110,000 reports in Salesforce and 3,000 dashboards within Salesforce. And every quarter when they run this, we are at least cleansing out 20 to 30,000 reports that are no longer in use in the past. And this is how we are using another very distinct use case for which we are using Heroku and combining that with power of Salesforce. With that, I hand it back to Andy, and we'll take any questions you have.
Yeah, some big love there for the Workday presentation. Thank you so much, Sai, for presenting that. I'm looking at the clock right now. We have precisely 2 minutes, 48 seconds for any questions. We'll obviously be available afterwards if anybody wants to ask us any. So I'm not sure what the arrangement is here, or whether you just shout and yell at us, or do we have any mics to give out to folks, or?
No. But happy to take any questions, or available after as well, as Andy mentioned.
Chris Peterson, do we want a question from Chris Peterson, Apex Product Manager? Of course we do.
What are the Apex limits that you struggle with the most?
The question from Chris there, what are the Apex limits that you struggle with the most?
Obviously, the synchronous CPU limit and is the biggest one, as well as heap limits as we are making a lot of these calculations in the memory. That's where we run into some of these heap sizes, right? So those are the two main ones that we struggle with today, as well as the number of batch jobs that you can process. I think each of those use cases, we had to develop those on Heroku because we were running into some issues on the Salesforce side because of the limitations. How we augment that and bring it back is the story. Nice seeing you, Chris.
Yeah, nice question, Chris. Any more? I see another member of my product team in the corner who's probably feeling a bit evil right now. Any questions? No. Okay, with that, we'll proceed just to tell you about a little bit more about the Heroku booth just over yonder. If you've got more questions to ask the team there, please go over there. Take a look at some amazing AI demos they've got with our partner Active Prime, who's doing generative AI for synthetic data. Pretty cool use case. Wander over to the booth. Please take a look at our Trailblazer community. This link has all sorts of other resources that we didn't want to bombard you with today. You can also chat with us through this link as well. So I'll leave that open for a few more moments, and do take a look at that QR code. So thank you, Sai. Great presentation.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone.